Hey everyone, it's me, Gretchen Rubin, host of the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast. And today I'm going to be joined by Dan Harris of 10% Happier. And while I'm waiting for Dan to join, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Because that's always interesting to know. And Dan is a guy who knows a lot about meditation. So tell us in the comments, do you meditate? Would you like to get into meditation or get back to meditation if it's something that you've done and you've kind of gotten away from it? Dan, he's the author of 10% Happier. He's got the 10% Happier app, the 10% Happier podcast. So we're going to talk to him about all of that. Let's see if he's there. And now, let's see, by the magic of technology, Dan Harris, let us know in the comments. Do you meditate? Do you want to meditate? There's Dan. Hey, man.
How you doing?
Good. How are you today?
I'm all right. Happier now that I'm seeing you.
I know. This is so fun. So I'm already seeing people in the comments saying, I love the 10% Happier app. I want to meditate. So I was just introducing you a little bit, saying you wrote the book 10% Happier. You have this app in addition to your journalist chops. And so just kick us off by saying, why do you think kind of meditation now more than ever?
Well, I think we are, to state something that's blazingly obvious, is that we're dealing with stress and anxiety now more than ever. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that meditation is really good. It's not the only thing. I'm not a meditation fundamentalist. I think there are many ways to deal with anxiety and stress, and I think we should avail ourselves of all of the options. But I think meditation, there is a really solid base of evidence, scientific research that seems to strongly suggest that meditation can really help with anxiety. And I've just seen it in my own life.
You're a fidgety skeptic, as you call yourself in one of your books.
Yes. Yeah. And notwithstanding the fact that I'm a meditation guru, I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety myself, and meditation has been helpful.
Yeah. You have a little kid. You and your wife both work. I'm sure it's like very distracting. You've got a lot of work pressures. You've got the family pressures. What are you finding is the thing that you're going to that's helping you stay the most grounded?
You know, I'll tell you, there's a meditation practice that's going to sound a little, I don't know, depending on your constitution, may sound a little sappy, but yeah, I was in a cycle, especially early on in this pandemic, where I was feeling a lot of anxiety and then feeling a lot of self-criticism for feeling that anxiety. The self-criticism ran along the lines of, Dan, the things you're worrying about are so selfish. And how can you be worrying about, the state of your career or the state of your family finances when you're so fortunate and, and you're supposed to be this meditation guy. How can you be stuck in these self-centered feelings? And so I actually called my meditation teacher, a guy named Goldstein, and we talked about it. And he said two things that were incredibly helpful. One was, welcome to being a human being. We're all filled with selfishness, and that's just your ancient anxiety is just part of your ancient programming trying to help you stay safe. Maybe not so skillfully, but it's trying to help you. And then the other thing you said was, you might want to do a specific kind of meditation that really can tune you in to the suffering that is so common right now and put you in a mode of wanting to be helpful and responsive. And so I've been doing that, and I can tell you what it is and how to do it if you think that's interesting.
Before somebody was asking if 10% Happier has a free trial. So I just want to get that little bit of it.
Yes.
Okay.
We definitely have a free trial. And the other thing is it's completely free to anybody who is a healthcare worker. And by healthcare worker, I mean, you could be nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, physician, admin, tech, orderly, custodial, whatever. Anybody who's in any way involved in the healthcare industry, just go to 10%.com/care and it's free.
Okay. So if you're just joining, it's me, Gretchen Rubin, host of the Happier podcast, talking to Dan Harris, who's all things 10% Happier. And Dan, you were just about to explain what is the form of meditation that you are finding particularly helpful right now? Because meditation, there's many flavors, there's many approaches, and this one is the one that's working for you.
Yeah. So mindfulness meditation is sort of probably the hottest kind of meditation, the kind that's been the recipient of the most um, media attention and also scientific research. And generally the move in mindfulness meditation is you sit and try to feel your breath coming in and going out. And then when you get distracted, you start again. And
Okay,
this has lots of.
So people give us a thumbs up if this is the kind of meditation that you have tried, like kind of like, I would call it like classic meditation, or at least in the West, this is the classic kind of meditation. This is the kind that I tried, which is your breath, bring it back, thoughts wander, come back. You're sitting on a calmly. Yeah. Okay. So, but you tried something else.
Lots of thumbs up. So
good. Yes.
That is the kind of meditation that's really got most of the airtime in our culture, and it's a great practice, and I teach it a lot on our app, and we have amazing teachers who teach it on the app. But traditionally there was another kind of practice that was taught in conjunction, and it goes by the supremely sappy name of loving kindness meditation. So as you can imagine, knowing me as you have for many years, Gretchen, when I first encountered this kind of meditation, I was skeptical.
You are not a sentimental guy.
No.
Yeah.
I am not. And it gets even worse because the practice, what you are supposed to do in this practice is systematically, you close your eyes, you envision various people or animals. So traditionally you start with yourself, and then you move to a good friend, and then you move to a neutral person, somebody you often overlook, which is a really interesting practice now because so many of these heretofore neutral people are saving our lives now by delivering food to us or manning the cashiers at pharmacies or grocery stores.
Yep.
And then you move to like a difficult person, and then you finish with all beings. And as you envision these people, you repeat silently phrases like, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you live with ease. Now,
somebody's saying, just give into the sappiness, Dan. You're getting a lot of people are saying that they like this form of meditation, and they are also commenting that they are also finding it especially helpful at this time. So, so keep going. I just wanted to throw that in.
No, that's great. And
somebody says 10% sappiness. Okay.
10% sappier. Yeah.
Actually,
that's
funny.
That's not a
good
bad
one.
name.
Good one.
So the punchline is that I have given into it, but I just want to give you some background that I had a lot of discomfort with this initially. But now I do quite a bit of this. In fact, most of my practice is in this area. And I think it's really interesting because there's a lot of science now around this type of practice, and it's been shown to have really positive psychological, physiological, and behavioral impacts. And so what it suggests is that compassion, or another word you might use is love, is a skill, not a factory setting that is unalterable. And that is a really radical notion and opens up so many interesting vistas for all of us, for humanity, as a matter of fact. And when there is a flavor of this practice where instead of just wishing people well, you can specifically wish that they be free of suffering. And so for me, I've been, just envisioning people in the ICU, both the physicians and the patients and their families who are in this anguishing position of not being able to see their loved ones, imagining the people who are scared on the front lines at the grocery store, at pharmacies, et cetera, and just wishing that they be free from suffering or from fear or from physical discomfort. And that has a way of just grounding me in what we all know intellectually, which is that most of us are very lucky. But we can lose sight of that when we're stuck in anxiety, which can be kind of a black hole of self-obsession.
Right. Well, I'm wondering too, if kind of an additional aspect of this is kind of a ritual of gratitude, because one of the things I've been very struck by, you and I both live in New York City, and like a really noticeable thing in New York City is that at 7 p.m. people will cheer, clap, and bang pots and pans together. And it's a very uncanny thing because you don't really see the people, at least where you don't see the people, but you hear the sound because it bounces off the buildings. And so there's this, and even if you kind of forgot that it's 7 o'clock, you'll hear through your windows that all this cacophony is happening. And it's so energizing and it's so uplifting. And I love it every single day. And so many people have said the same thing. And I wonder if it's a kind of a way to tap into the same thing, which is to put your mind out, to think about all these people who are on the front lines and and to feel the sense of community. But this is a way you can do it yourself, which is more in your control. And it's just like another way to do it. Along with a kind of community ritual like the one that we're experiencing in New York City.
Well, let me just pick up on that, because I first of all, the 7 o'clock ritual I think is amazing. My son, who's playing right over here, he and I and my wife, and we go to the windows too, and it's just incredible. And yes, +1 to what you said, there are many ways to train the muscle of compassion, kindness, love. And we, by the way, these are lofty terms that I don't think are actually that helpful. I think it helps to kind of define it down.
Yeah.
You can think of love as just the innate capacity we have through evolution, by the way, to care about people other than ourselves. Right. And by the way, it's an omnidirectional force, so it should go inward too. You should care about yourself too. But we needed the capacity to care about other people in order to survive as a species. Yes. So we come by this honestly, and therefore it is something that we can work on, and you can do it through meditation, you can do it through acts of service, you can do it through, as you said, ritualized gratitude. Yeah.
So if you're just joining, it's me, Gretchen Rubin, host of the Happier podcast, talking to Dan Harris, who is host of that 10% Happier podcast and app, and wrote the great book, 10% Happier, and the book Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics, which is like in my all-time favorite book titles, I think in my top 10. And we're talking about meditation. So thumbs up if you do meditate or you want to get back into meditation, because I don't know what you're seeing, Dan, but are you seeing with your folks that there's a lot of people who maybe, I think this is something that's kind of in the background of a lot of people where they're doing it, or maybe they've drifted away, but they want to come back. But maybe now a lot of people are sort of like, okay, this is moving to the top of my list right now. Are you seeing a lot of people re-engaging?
Yes.
I think thumbs up if you're re-engaging. Yeah, I'm seeing tons of thumbs up.
We're seeing a lot of people, we're seeing a lot of incoming and a lot of interest and a lot of pain, really. And just doing our best as a company and a team to meet it. And, you know, I think this is largely a bleak situation, but there are some positives. I don't want to be Mr. Pollyanna, you know, all just focusing on the silver lining, but there are silver linings. And one of them is, I think if many millions of people start thinking about training the mind, taking care of the mind, that's a really positive thing that can come out of this.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you know, I think there's a lot of talk about, technology is a good servant and a bad master. And I think sometimes in the past we focused on sort of the bad master part of it, but now we're like, wow, it's a great servant too. And I think people are seeing ways that apps and technology can help us come closer to other people, and maybe also be tools that can help us to develop the habits that really are going to pay off for us. Because I know in Writing Better Than Before, what I saw is like, people, like, it's like, look for every tool that can work for you. Like, don't hand wave something that might have be the key, because people are so different. And I think now a lot of people are exploring things that maybe they wouldn't have had time for before, or they wouldn't have just like moved to the top of the to-do list. And now they're seeing, like, all these people are saying, oh, I love the app. They're really finding these resources that then they can use a year from now, 5 years from now.
Yeah. I think that's right. Can I ask a question of you?
Yeah.
So, you know, I know you and I have talked so many times over the years about, you have tried meditation. It's never quite, been something that you've been able to create an abiding habit around. And I just came to me as we were talking about this other form of meditation, this loving kindness form of meditation, which is so good at, for sort of, I don't know what your inner dialogue is like, but mine is pretty self-critical. And this is a really good way to kind of shave down on some of that. It's really helpful for dealing with difficult people in terms of working on my own motivations in that sphere. I just wonder whether this possibly would be an appealing practice for you as an alternative.
Well, now that you say that, I think it could be, because we've talked about this, because I use you as my private consultant. Is the whole, like, take the mind down, I don't find to be a helpful thing. I don't find it to be helpful. And I've given it two solid, really good tries. And give me a thumbs up if you've tried meditation and it has not worked for you, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only person who has tried it and it hasn't worked for me. I mean, I didn't have any trouble making the habit of it, but I didn't feel like it was worth doing for me. But this is something very different. To me, this feels very different. This feels like something like training my mind on something. And I have found in my own life that when I go out of my way with somebody who's like difficult, to think about, well, why am I grateful for that person? Or like, what is that person adding to my life? Or how am I taking that person for granted? Or that it really does help me to reframe my relationships. So it might be that might feel like a more energizing and kind of helpful way for me to direct my attention, because the whole observe your thoughts as they go by, I don't know why, just like that just does not work for me.
Yeah.
Well, somebody says some days are better than others. Yeah.
I mean, I just want to, I said this to you privately, but publicly, like, just to also say that's, I mean, I think that's absolutely fine. And not every practice is going to resonate with every person. And it's helpful to think about the word meditation a little bit like the word sports. It describes a whole range of activities. And so we may, sorry, that's my son laughing. We may have just you may have just found a practice that wasn't the right one for you. And it's possible, I'm not saying it's, I'm not wagging my finger and saying you must do anything, but I wonder whether this would be an experiment that would be worth running for you.
Well, and I wonder, I can kind of, sort of my lawyer side, I can get kind of caught on definitions. And I think for me, a lot of it is like, is this properly meditation? And maybe I've had too constrained a definition of what people mean by meditation, and that I could open my mind to like a different way of thinking about it. If you're just joining, it's me, Gretchen Rubin, host of the Happier Podcast with Dan Harris of 10% Happier podcast, app, and book. We're talking about happiness, but also in specific meditation. Give us a thumbs up in the comments if you find it helpful to meditate. Someone said, oh, here's a good question, Dan. What about guided meditation versus silent meditation? Because I remember back in the day, you and I talked about this, because I felt like guided meditation was like a cheat. And you explained to me why that was not the case. So explain that.
Yeah, let me just say two things. You said something before I wanted to respond to that was so interesting. This is the problem with talking to you. You say too many interesting things. But you said something before about having your lawyer mind get caught up on what's proper meditation.
Yes.
Just occurred to me that the ancient term for meditation from the Indian subcontinent was bhavana, which literally translates as cultivation. And it just means that the mind has lots of aspects, many aspects to the mind, many mental states, many traits like generosity, compassion, calm, goodwill, that are trainable. And so you were working on one, which was sort of mindfulness, which is a self-awareness practice.
Yeah.
But there are other aspects that I think might be interesting for you. So that I just wanted to say that in response to your comment. In terms of, what was the other question?
Guided
silent
versus silent.
guided. Yeah. So no, they're both great. And now you have to take whatever I say with a grain of salt, because I co-founded a company that delivers guided meditations to people. So, caveat emptor here. But I mean, I think it's an uncontroversial assertion to say that it is not cheating to do guided meditation. I do both because I've been at it for like 11 years now, and I started before there were apps. I generally do unguided meditation on my own, but every time I do a guided meditation, I think, why am I not doing this more often? Because it is so helpful to have somebody to remind you of these things that, in my case, I've heard a million times, but I need to hear over and over again.
Okay, somebody's got.
Let me just let you see what the noise is.
Listening to a child laugh is great. Yo, that's great.
Yeah.
That's so fun. Okay, someone says, this is a good question. Do you consider zoning out in nature a form of meditation? Excellent question.
So I think zoning out in nature is really healthy, but I'd be reluctant to call it meditation, because meditation is not zoning out, it's zoning in. It is really, it has a deliberate aspect to it.
Can you zone in nature? Could you be walking?
Yeah. I'm trying to decide whether I put my son
let it
in another room.
Free. Like, that's where we are now. I mean, What good is a conference call if someone doesn't do something unexpected?
How do you zone in nature? So there's so many ways. The senses are you can let your senses rip. You can deliberately pay attention to sounds. You can deliberately pay attention to the sensations on your body, the wind. You can deliberately pay attention to what you're seeing. There are so many ways to tune into the raw data of your sensory input that takes you below the level of discursive, yammering thought and into the raw data of your senses. And that's the training, or part of the training, which is to get you out of the monkey mind, the habitual, often negative, repetitive thought processes, and get you sort of into something deeper, which is often your sensory input.
So I love this idea of not zoning out, but zoning in. Somebody else asked, what kind of meditation can help build self-compassion? Now you've said how loving kindness can also be directed to the self. So that seems like one answer. Or do you think that's the best one for that?
I mean, I think it's a great practice for self-compassion because you are literally envisioning yourself and sending yourself these phrases, which again to me at least felt a little artificial and sappy at the beginning, but over time your inner, in my case, my inner weather really started to change. And when I would see aspects of myself that I don't like, and there are many, arise in my own mind or my own life, my attitude has subtly been shifting over time, where I'm meeting my anger or my greed or my impatience with a little bit less resistance and more like, oh yeah, that's just some old program inserted in me by the culture or by my parents or by evolution that is trying to protect me, it's trying to do right by me, but it's not super skillful, and I can give it a hug and let it go. And that has been really helpful to me.
So you've had sort of more of a distance from it in a way. A lot of people are talking about guided versus unguided or silent. So weigh in the comments. Just put guided or either what is the proper term for? Is it unguided or silent? What would you call the opposite of a guided meditation?
I want to show you that my son is hitting me with a cat toy.
Oh, there you go. People love that. They're loving the laughter and the little bit of actual life coming in. So
well. Spend some time in my apartment. There's a lot of actual life here.
There you go. So what's the opposite of guided meditation? Unguided. A lot of people are saying both.
They're like both. Guided or unguided. Yeah.
Guided or unguided. And again, I'm Gretchen Rubin, host of the Happier Podcast. This is Dan Harris, host of 10% Happier podcast and app and the book and other books and, ABC correspondent. And it looks like a lot of people like guided. Yes. This is interesting.
My wife's been doing, I'm very careful not to check in on my wife's meditation practice because there's nothing more annoying than that.
Yes. My husband would say that there is a risk at being partnered with somebody who marches around with talking about this stuff all the time. Yeah.
But I have to say in your defense, so you describe yourself self-deprecatingly as a happiness bully, but that's one of the many things that I love about you, because I can talk about a problem with you and then you'll give me a million suggestions. I love it. So, but anyway, just back to my wife, she's been showing me her phone, because she's finally been using the 10% Happier app quite a bit to do guided meditations, particularly around sleep. So I really think there's an enormous value in guided meditations. And again, you have to take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because I have a financial interest here. But you don't have to use my app. There are many great apps out there, really many great apps.
And some people are asking about using mantras or positive affirmations as kind of a grounding of a meditation. What do you think about those practices?
So mantra, it's... When I think of the word mantra, it can have a technical meaning in that there's a kind of meditation traditionally from the Hindu religion that uses a mantra or a silently repeated word. One of the most famous variants of this is transcendental meditation, but there are other forms of this kind of meditation, where you have you're given a mantra and you repeat that word silently as a way to settle the mind down. So I come more out of the Buddhist tradition. This is the mantras are, while there are some in the Buddhist tradition, it's much more of a Hindu focus. but I think it's a great way to practice. And there's been a lot of scientific research into TM. And from what I can tell, the results are positive.
And somebody else is asking about, what about soothing music with meditation? Is that a distraction? Is that good? Like, what do you think?
You know, it's not an area where I have a lot of expertise. It's never been something that I've been drawn to. And I have a hard time imagining how it isn't just another thing that's distracting you. As it seems more like the zoning out than the zoning in. I can imagine where it would be healthy activity, but I have trouble computing a little bit how it is zoning in, how it is meditation.
Right. Because meditation isn't just sort of like everything that is kind of good for your mind. It's a specific. Okay, somebody asked this: sitting on a floor or on a chair, does it matter?
No, it doesn't. Okay. I don't sit on the floor. I sit on a chair. Here, come on. I am. Hello.
Hello.
That's Gretchen.
Hey,
yeah.
Alexander.
Hi.
Hi.
So I sit on a chair, and I'm not flexible enough to sit on cross-legged, and I never really liked that anyway. But so there are 4 traditional postures per the Buddha. One is sitting, one is standing, one is walking, one is lying down. So it's pretty. I know my wife does a lot of lying down.
Okay. Well, and on that note, somebody asked something that reminds me of the kind of the nature question that somebody else posed. Somebody said, sometimes I'd get into a very meditative state. Could that be counted as moving meditation? So I think people are grappling with what is the mental state that is meditation, which again is kind of back to my lawyerly definition question. So when are we zoning out? When are we zoning in?
Right. So this is so easy to get hung up on. You and I have had many, many conversations about it. So you should bear in mind that I come from a particular tradition. So my answers aren't etched in stone. It's just my opinion. My opinion, coming out of the mindfulness/Buddhist tradition, is that there are, as you said, there are many things you can do with your mind, from watching Netflix to taking a walk, or as you like to do, go to the museum and just let the mind wander as you're looking at things. All of those are very, very positive. Or for me, going for a run where I'm listening to music or practicing, lectures I'd like to give my boss. All of that is really healthy, and I'm super pro all of that. But for meditation, it's a deliberate, focused training of the mind where you are intentionally engaged in a practice to cultivate qualities of mind.
So something can seem meditative in a kind of colloquial sense, but it is not meditation in that it's meditation. Okay, but somebody brings up something that I think is a big challenge, and give us a thumbs up if this is a challenge that you have faced. What if you are getting sleepy or actually falling asleep? I remember Elizabeth and I, there's no like a meditation is always a positive, because even a failed meditation is a good nap, which I thought was funny. I just can't remember his name. But what do you say? I think that give us a thumbs up if that's a challenge that you face, because I think for some people they begin to sink into that and then they quickly it becomes a challenge.
It's a huge challenge, and I would say don't worry about it.
Okay.
So if you fall asleep, I think that's brilliant. What was told you, that it's not a failed meditation, it's a good nap, and we are sleep deprived as a culture, and I don't see it as a problem. Oh. The other thing to do is, if you're sitting and you're nodding off, and this happens to me all the time, stand up. I just stand up, meditate, and I have fallen asleep standing up, but it is
you have.
Oh yes.
What happens?
I just can notice myself nodding off and almost falling over, but. I really don't think something you use as a hammer to beat yourself over the head. Either just give into it and fall asleep, or stand up.
Okay, yeah. Someone says, this is making me want to start meditating again. So that's great. So if somebody is in that mode in there. So again, I'm Gretchen Rubin. This is Dan Harris. I'm from Happier with Gretchen Rubin. Dan is from 10% Happier, podcast, book, and app. If somebody's sort of like, okay, this has got me intrigued. I've been intrigued for a long time. I want to get started. How would you say, what's like the baby step? I know you said that there's the free trial on your app, that 10% Happier. So people, if they want to like do that route, or like, what's kind of a good baby step way to get into this?
So there are really many baby step ways. So that if you want to go the app route, yes, all of the great apps have, and there are many great apps. I'm obviously partial to 10% Happier, but there are many really great apps
Great
out there.
title. Yeah.
They all have free trials, so check it out. The other thing is just read a good book, and there are lots of great meditation books. Again, I'm partial to my own, but Sharon Salzberg, for example, has written a great one called Real Happiness.
Yes.
And the instructions are right there and totally doable. Another thing to do outside of a pandemic is to go to a local center. There are lots of places in New York City and major cities where you can learn how to do it in person. And the final thing I'll say is, and this is a little self-promotional, which is that every weekday during this pandemic.
Yes, I wanted to mention this. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So every weekday at 3 p.m. So Dan, you've been doing this for a while now. Today, you're getting your community get together, just so Elizabeth and I are getting our community together to lead people in meditation and take questions. So if this is just like, just whetting your appetite. So you're doing it Monday through Friday at 3 p.m., right?
Yes.
Is it at your handle, Dan Harris, or 10% Happier? I can't.
We're actually doing it on YouTube. So you can go to YouTube and search for 10% Happier, or you can go to 10%.com/live.
Okay.
And I think we're going to start simulcasting it on Facebook and Instagram too. But we do, just 5 minutes of meditation, and then we take questions from the audience. And it's really meant to just be an afternoon sanity break for people.
Right. Well, that's great, because I think for a lot of people, even having something in your day, and give me a thumbs up if you're finding this, like, it's good to have something that kind of anchors your day. Even something like your children, and there's my phone, your children having schoolwork, but if you just have something that makes the day feel more oriented, because time is not the same as it's been in the past. I think something like having a 3 o'clock check-in. And for you obligers out there, if you are trying to meditate and you want accountability, join this at 3, and you're going to be doing it with the whole community. And that is a way that you can get yourself going. So that is great for and if you don't know if you're an obliger, take the quiz.gretchenrubin.com. But I can imagine that for a lot of people, joining in that kind of activity could really help them re-engage in the habit and get going.
Yes, I think that's really true. And we're hearing that from a lot of people, that it's nice to know that you can do it at a set time. Obviously, the video from the session lives on YouTube in perpetuity, so you can do it anytime you want. Yeah. But for the folks who are tuning in live, and there are thousands of them, it really, as you said, anchors their day. And I love what you said about the feeling of time has completely warped. And to have something you're going to do every day that's good for you, that gives you a sense of groundedness and calm, I think is deeply helpful.
Well, and also Elizabeth and I interviewed Isaac Mizrahi for the Happier podcast a while back, and he said something that I just have not been able to get out of my head, which is that when he was little, and even to this day, when he has insomnia, he has terrible insomnia, he wants to watch TV, and he can't watch something like HBO where it's just like whenever you want. He wants to watch something where it's like it doesn't have to be broadcasted, it can be cable, but it has to be like Property Brothers is on now. So that he has a feeling that if I'm watching Property Brothers, other people are watching Property Brothers, even though it's the middle of the night, because it makes him feel like there's a sense of community. And I think right now, where people are very isolated, the idea that something is happening right now, and even though I don't see these people and I don't know these people, we're all having something happening at the same time, is sort of weirdly unifying and comforting. So I can see that it's great that it's on YouTube, and a lot of people probably want to do it then. But the idea that you can do something feeling like this is happening right now, and I'm joining with all these people who are also experiencing it right now, is just very energizing, I think. Yeah.
I think that's exactly right. And I also think that, there is another quieter pandemic right now, and that's loneliness.
Yes.
And you can be lonely even if you're not alone. You can be lonely when you're totally overcrowded with other human beings. It has to do with the quality of the relationships around you. And you can feel lonely even if you have a great home life, but you're missing your colleagues. And so creating the sense of community is a big part of what we're trying to do.
if you're interested in loneliness, Elizabeth and I had a very special episode, a whole episode dedicated to loneliness because it's such a huge happiness stumbling block. Okay, Dan, I want to ask one more question of you from everybody, and then I'll let you go. Because I think this is another very common challenge. Thumbs up if this is a challenge you have faced in meditation. How do I stop from making a mental to-do list when I try to meditate? How does somebody do that?
Don't stop. You can't stop the mind. The mind is secreting thoughts, as my friend Jeff says. The mind secretes thoughts like the stomach secretes enzymes. Like stopping thinking is impossible and is going to just make you miserable. A time-tested way to deal with any thought pattern that's arising repeatedly in the mind is just to give it a little label, a silent label in the mind. So for me, I'll just say planning quietly, just label it as planning. And what that does is, instead of it feeling like this monolithic set of thoughts that I'm buying into, I just notice, I have all of a sudden some journalistic distance, like, oh yeah, that's what this is. This is planning. And then, you can apply that to anger, you can apply that to fear. And then having that distance between the emotion or the thought pattern and you can mean that when it hits you in the rest of your life, you're not so yanked around by it. You're trying to have a conversation with your kid and you're silently doing a to-do list. Just label it as planning. Mwah, thank you. I'll get back to you later. And then it comes back, repeat the move.
Okay. Because I can see how trying to like squelch a thought is like, has that paradoxical effect of like, don't think about a white elephant, because the more you try not to think about it, the more you think about it. And then you're like thinking about the fact that you can't stop thinking about it. And then you're in like a kind of dressing room, hall of mirrors, nightmare. Someone says, acknowledge the thought and gently bring yourself back to your breath. So, okay, I'm just going to confess one of the big problems that I found with meditation, which is a particular problem right now, which is whenever I try to think about my breath, I immediately cannot breathe and feel like choking and like can't catch my breath. And like right now, whenever people are like, and some people are experiencing shortness of breath, I immediately am like, I can't breathe either. I have shortness of breath. I can't, if I think about my breath at all, it's like all I can do is think about my breath in a really super uncomfortable way. So for me, thinking about the breath is like, does not work. I don't know if anybody else has that issue, because the last time I tried it, because my husband Jamie was trying to get us to do it as a family meditation, I was thinking about my feet against the ground. Yes. That was working much better for me than the breath, which I think is fine, right? Like I could just sub that in.
The breath is, a bit of an arbitrary choice. I mean, first of all, just to validate, that's very common what you described.
Okay, good. I didn't know that. Yeah, thumbs up if you've had that too, if I'm not alone. Okay.
There are many people who have that experience. It makes you anxious. It makes people anxious to focus on the breath. So picking something like the sensation of your feet on the ground or the sensation of your whole body sitting, really what we're trying to do is to take you out of the realm of thoughts and put you into the realm of direct experience through your senses. And so you can pick anything. The other thing we can do is, again, for you, would be to go into an entirely different form of meditation, which would be the love and kindness meditation we discussed earlier, where you're cultivating, instead of a self-awareness, you're cultivating a friendliness or a sense of compassion toward other people and yourself.
Excellent. Well, on that beautiful note, Dan, thanks so much. I think this was super helpful for people because so many people are wanting to bring this into their lives, just generally, even before all the pandemic happened, but now more than ever. So tell people if they want to follow up, if they want tell them about the YouTube, tell them about what they can get on the app. Like the book is great. If you like, I always like to read a book about things, and 10% Happier is just like, it's such a charming memoir. In addition to having all the information about how you got drawn into meditation. So tell people where they can follow up if they want to go further.
Big thanks to you, because you were really one of the earliest supporters of 10% Happier. And so I'm eternally grateful to you for that. And so it became a podcast called 10% Happier, and it's also an app called 10% Happier. There's a free trial if you want to check it out. And if you're a healthcare worker, it's totally free. You can go to 10%, TenperCent.com/care. And it's free. And what else? The live meditations every day, 3 Eastern, noon Pacific at 10%.com/live, or just go to YouTube and search for 10%. We spell it out now the book was numerical, 10%, and now we spell it as
It's so confusing, right?
I know.
It's like, and then 10, is it digital 10 or spelled out 10? It's like, these are the things that end up kind of driving you crazy. But this is why it's good that you meditate, because you can stay so calm in the face of these like frustrations.
But I do want to say that I'm really glad that I got to see you in person right before the pandemic.
Yes,
and,
we were like 2 days before. It was like when the window closed.
And I hope to see you again when this thing dies down.
I know. See you on the other side. Okay, everybody, let's keep our hands clean and our minds clear. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Appreciate it.